Homework 8, section 7.3, simple interest, video number 2. Let's look at some examples of simple interest. One's pretty straightforward, the other one has a couple of issues. Let's start with this one. You borrow $3,600 for 3 years at 8% simple interest. Question A, what is the interest? And question B, what is the future value? Both of these are pretty straightforward, but you should at least first identify what your variables are, or the given values, what variables they represent. I'm still looking for that blasted red marker. Where did I put it? I know I didn't throw it away. Hello. Huh. Oh well, I guess I'll have to go without a red marker. They just have hiding over here. Sorry folks. Anyway, so let's figure out this first one. I invite you to pause the video and see if you can calculate it on your own. All you have to do is identify which variables are represented by these values and use your formulas correctly. So let's begin. When you're calculating a simple interest problem, you should ask yourself what each value represents. For example, when you borrow $3,600, that's your principal. So at some level, you should identify that P equals 3,600. The T is the term of the loan, or the time, and in this case, it's 3 years. The time is always calculated in years. And our interest rate is 8%. But as was mentioned in the previous video, you don't really do math with percents. You describe things with percents. You do math with their decimal equivalents. Recall how to convert a percent back to a decimal. Locate the decimal place currently in the percent, move it 2 places to the left. So if we move this decimal 2 places to the left, we would need to stick a 0 on and get an interest rate of 0.08. So there's the values that we're going to use. And to calculate the interest, we simply have to multiply principal times interest rate times time. So we're going to multiply 3,600 times 3 times 0.08. So be sure to have a calculator ready. This section is the first section, well, this in the previous section, where having a calculator isn't just a convenience, it's downright a necessity. Whereas in the previous material about sets and logic, we really didn't have many numbers. But the product here ends up being 864. Which means your price for borrowing this money under these conditions is $864. So what's the future value? Well, the future value is just how much you borrowed, the principal, plus the extra interest you have to pay for the privilege of borrowing that money. So 3,600 plus 864, and it looks like it's going to be, can't believe I'm using a calculator for this, $4,464. So that's how much you owe for borrowing this money for 3 years. Now, do you pay it all off at the end, or how do you pay it off? Well, we'll talk about that in a future video. So pretty straightforward. But let's take a look at the next example, which has a couple of twists to it. You invest $5,000 in a CD, a certificate of deposit, that pays 3 3/4% interest, simple interest, annually, and you invest it for 18 months. A few things different about this one. Number one, we're investing money, so at the end we're going to make more. Notice the interest rate is a lot lower. That's usually how it works for investments versus borrowing. But there's a couple of other glitches that need addressing. Not with the principal. The principal is just $5,000. That's how much we're investing. Well, what about the time? What's different about this time besides the previous one? Well, the time in this one is 18 months, but our formula requires that the time be in years. So the question is, if we have months, how do you turn that into years? I think you already know this. For example, if you ask somebody how old their toddler is, and they reply 24 months, in the back of your mind, you're probably thinking, why didn't you just say 2 years? Well, how do you turn 24 into 2 And the answer is you divide by 12, since there are 12 months in 1 year. So, if your time is in months, you have to divide by 12 to get years. So we're going to take 18 and write 18 divided by 12 as a fraction. Now, do you need to divide that out right now? You could. This would be 1.5, so it wouldn't be that intolerable. However, it's perfectly acceptable to leave it as a fraction, even an unreduced fraction, because in a minute we're going to get out the calculator anyway. Let's talk about the interest rate. Well, the interest rate's a percent as we expected, but we have a problem. Over here, we can move the decimal easily because it was a whole number. But in this interest rate, our interest rate is a mixed number and it has a fraction. So when your interest is a mixed number, you should first convert the fraction to a decimal and then move the decimal place over. So let's just write out what would happen here. The interest rate as a percent is 3 3/4%. Do you remember the procedure for turning a fraction into a decimal? In a word, divide. If we did 3 divided by 4, we would get 0.05. So 3 3/4 as a decimal is 3.75. However, this is still a percent. We haven't moved any decimal places yet. But now we can. Move the decimal 2 places to the left. That would require an extra 0. So our interest rate as a decimal is 0.0375. And now that we have all the pieces, we just need to put them into a calculator. Our interest is going to be the principal, which is 5,000, times, and I'm going to write X for times so that I can mention something about calculator keystrokes. Our time is not yet. PRT is the order we're going to do it in, although it's a multiplication problem, so it really doesn't matter. The principal was 5,000 times the interest rate is 0.0375 times the time, but the time is a fraction because we had to convert from months to years. So to put this in a calculator, we can just put 18 divided by 12. This is what I was alluding to earlier. There's really no need to calculate the time separately as a decimal. We could just use it as is, as a division problem embedded in the formula. And now I just have to push all this in a calculator. So let's get out a calculator. 5,000 times 0.0375 times 18 divided by 12 is exactly $281.25. I thought it was going to be a whole number, so let me just do it one more time. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. Oh, that's not right. Let's try that again. 5,000 times 0.0375 times 18 divided by 12. Yep, $281.25. So what would that make the future value? Capital A, just the principal, 5,000, plus the interest, $281.25. So if we add that, we get $5,281.25. Which means it took us 18 months to make $281. That's not a lot of money to make over 18 months, but it's free money. Would you turn it away? I wouldn't. So how do you get a lot of interest? More than this? Well, we could increase the principal. If this were $50,000, then this would be $2,812.50. Better, but still for 18 months, it's not much money. We could get a higher interest rate, but we really can't control that. Or we can invest it for a longer amount of time. So there are things you can do to increase the interest, but only 2 of them are really in your control. The principal that you invest and the time for which you invest it. The interest rate is usually up to someone else.